Admiral James Reynolds stood alone at the center of the Galactic Council chambers, his weathered face illuminated by harsh lights from above. The circular room stretched hundreds of meters in every direction, with tiered seating rising so high the uppermost levels disappeared into shadow. 5,000 representatives from across the galaxy watched him, their varied anatomies creating a living tapestry of evolutionary paths. Some floated in specialized containment fields, others sat on modified platforms, but all eyes, regardless of shape, number, or visual spectrum, were fixed on the single human. The 7 Grand Counselors sat on elevated daïses before him, each representing one of the founding species of the Galactic Confederacy. Their massive chairs, carved from rare metals and living crystal, dwarfed the humans standing before them. "The assembly will come to order," announced Grand Counselor Vextor, his translucent tentacles pulsing with bioluminescent anger. "Humanity stands accused of violating Galactic Peace Statute 437, the unprovoked destruction of 3 Draven patrol vessels in the neutral zone near the Orion Spur." A ripple of hisses, clicks, and electronic chirps spread through the assembly. "The evidence has been reviewed," Vextor continued, gesturing to holographic displays materializing around the chamber. "The punishment for such actions is clear: planetary quarantine for 1 standard century and surrender of all faster-than-light technology." Reynolds remained perfectly still, his military uniform crisp despite the 12-hour wait in the antechamber. At 58, with silver at his temples and lines etched deep around his eyes, he carried himself with the calm assurance of someone who had faced worse odds. "Before sentencing," Vextor said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "does the human representative wish to address the council?" "I do," Reynolds replied, his voice unexpectedly strong for an atmosphere not calibrated to human vocal cords. The chamber's automatic translation systems converted his words into the 57 primary languages of the Confederacy. "Admiral Reynolds," interrupted Counselor Calbreck, the insectoid representative of the Ziltar Dominion. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke. "You understand that your species has been part of the Confederacy for barely 23 standard years. Your testimony carries little weight against founding members who have guided interstellar peace for millennia." Reynolds nodded. "I understand the Council's position, Honored Counselor. However, with respect, Earth did not attack without provocation." He paused, looking directly at the Draven delegation. "Those weren't patrol vessels. They were bioweapon delivery systems approaching our colonies. We have proof." The chamber erupted in noise. The Draven ambassador rose from his seat, his exoskeleton clicking as armored plates shifted in agitation. "Silence," thundered Vextor, and the chamber quieted instantly. "These are serious accusations against a founding member of the Confederacy." "The human lies," shrieked the Draven ambassador, his translator struggling to modulate the high-pitched sounds. "We demand immediate sentencing." Reynolds tapped his wrist device. "With the Council's permission, I would like to present our evidence." Vextor exchanged glances with the other Grand Counselors, then nodded reluctantly. "Proceed." The chamber darkened as new holographic displays appeared, showing detailed scans of the destroyed vessels. Reynolds manipulated the display, highlighting specific sections. "These aren't standard patrol configurations," he explained, zooming in on containment systems. "These ships were outfitted with Class 9 biological delivery systems, capable of dispersing pathogens across an entire planetary atmosphere." "This proves nothing," interrupted Counselor Mesdar, her crystalline form reflecting the holographic light. "The Draven have every right to transport medical supplies. Medical supplies require notification under Section 12 of the Interspecies Medical Transport Agreement," Reynolds countered. "No notification was received. When our patrol ships questioned the vessels, they opened fire." "Fabrications," shouted the Draven ambassador. Reynolds manipulated his display again. "We anticipated your skepticism, which is why we're prepared to offer irrefutable evidence." He looked toward the massive entrance doors at the far end of the chamber. The doors slid open, and a single human woman walked in, her steps measured and deliberate. Dr. Lydia Mercer, Earth's leading xenobiologist, carried a small metallic case. The council chamber erupted in confused shouts as security drones swarmed toward her. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" demanded Vextor. "This session is closed to additional participants. This woman is Dr. Lydia Mercer," Reynolds explained calmly as alarms began to sound throughout the station. And she isn't an additional participant. She's our evidence. Security drones surrounded Mercer, scanning beams passing over her and the case. Suddenly, the station's AI voice echoed through the chamber. Alert. Unknown biohazard detected. Chamber security protocols engaged. Force fields activated, separating different sections of the chamber as air filtration systems engaged emergency protocols. The representatives broke into panic, some attempting to flee while others demanded explanations. Explain yourself immediately, Vexator roared, his appendages flashing bright colors in agitation. Mercer placed the case carefully on the floor before her and opened it, revealing a spherical device glowing with soft blue light. This, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos, is a temporal recording module. It contains the final transmissions from Colony Athena before the Draven test-fired their new bioweapon 3 months ago. The device activated, projecting a three-dimensional scene showing human colonists collapsing, their bodies visibly deteriorating as they gasped for breath. Medical staff rushed between victims, themselves beginning to show symptoms within minutes. 87 humans died in that attack, Reynolds stated flatly. It was disguised as a geological survey ship malfunction. We recovered fragments of the delivery system. This is impossible, whispered Counselor Eklara, her feathered crest flattening against her skull in distress. The Draven signed the biological warfare prohibition alongside the other founding species. They did, confirmed Reynolds. But they've been developing weapons in secret for decades. We've been monitoring them since they attempted to infiltrate our research facilities on Mars 5 years ago. The Draven ambassador rose again, his exoskeleton clicking rapidly. These are lies. Manipulated evidence. The humans are. We anticipated denial, Mercer interrupted, adjusting the device. So we brought something more convincing. The hologram shifted to show clandestine meetings between Draven scientists and representatives from 3 other council races. The timestamps and location data were clearly visible in the corner of each recording. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. These other species, Vextor said slowly, his luminescence dimming. They are your closest allies, Reynolds finished for him. The bioweapon was designed to target humans specifically, but its development was funded by 1/3 of this council. The accusations flew across the chamber as species turned against each other. Security drones hovered uncertainly, their programming unprepared for division among the leadership. How did you obtain these recordings? Demanded Counselor Tolvek, his gelatinous form rippling with agitation. Our security is impenetrable. Reynolds smiled thinly. Not to us. You've been spying on council members? Calbrecht clicked his mandibles in outrage. We prefer to call it defensive intelligence gathering, Reynolds replied. And it's fortunate we did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have discovered Project Purification. The chamber went completely silent at the name. I see some of you recognize the term, Reynolds noted, watching the Grand Counselors carefully. For those who don't, Project Purification is an initiative to systematically eliminate species deemed disruptive or unworthy of galactic citizenship. Humanity was first on the list, but certainly not the last. Representatives from smaller, newer Confederacy members rose in their sections, demanding explanations. This is how your retaliation begins? Vextor asked, his voice suddenly quiet. By fracturing the Confederacy we have maintained for 12,000 years? No, Reynolds said, his eyes hard. This was just to establish our credibility. He nodded to Mercer, who activated a communications device. The retaliation, she said clearly, begins now. The massive view screens around the chamber suddenly activated, showing hundreds of unmarked vessels, appearing near the council station and key installations throughout Draven space. Station. Defenses compromised, announced the station's AI. Unknown override in progress as the council watched in stunned silence. Reynolds spoke into his communicator. This is Admiral Reynolds. Phase 1 complete. Execute Phase 2. The council chambers descended into chaos. Representatives from 100 worlds were on their feet, shouting accusations and demands. Security drones darted through the air, weapon systems powered but unable to identify clear targets. The 7 Grand Counselors conferred urgently on their elevated platforms, while emergency alerts flashed across holographic displays. Dr. Lydia Mercer stood calmly beside, Admiral Reynolds in the center of the storm, the case at her feet still projecting damning evidence. She was a stark contrast to Reynolds, where he was military precision. She was scientific focus, her silver-streaked hair pulled back tightly, her eyes sharp behind simple glasses she wore by choice rather than necessity. "Silence," roared Grand Counselor Vexator, his voice amplified through the chamber systems. The noise gradually subsided as species throughout the vast hall returned to their seats or containment fields. When order was finally restored, Vexator fixed his compound eyes on Reynolds and Mercer. "You have brought weapons into Confederacy space," he stated, his tentacles pulsing with angry light. "This is an act of war against not just the Draven but the entire Galactic Confederacy." "No," Reynolds replied evenly. "We brought a defense fleet." "There's a difference. A fleet that appeared from nowhere," hissed Counselor Calbreck. "Our sensors detected nothing until they were already in position." Mercer smiled slightly. "Your sensor technology has limitations you weren't aware of." "Impossible," muttered Counselor Tulvek, his gelatinous form rippling with disbelief. "No species possesses cloaking, technology capable of concealing capital ships from our detection grid." "No species you know of," corrected Reynolds. The massive view screen surrounding the chamber shifted to show a new face, Fleet Commander Maya Ortiz, her expression severe as she addressed the council from the bridge of Earth's flagship. "Honored counselors," she began formally, "I command the First Earth Defense Fleet. We currently have targeting solutions for every major military installation in Draven space, as well as the hidden weapons research facilities on Proxima Centauri III, Epsilon Eridani, and Tau Ceti, facilities officially registered as cultural preservation centers." The Draven ambassador made a high-pitched sound that the translation systems couldn't interpret, while representatives from several implicated worlds shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "For 3 years," continued Ortiz, "we've monitored your communications, infiltrated your secure networks, and placed operatives throughout Confederate territory. We know about the bioweapons program targeting not just humans, but 17 other species considered evolutionary dead ends by the Council leadership." "The human lies grow more outrageous," shouted the Draven ambassador, mandibles clacking violently. Mercer tapped a control, and new holographic displays appeared, showing internal Draven communications discussing targeted pathogen development. "Your encryption was sophisticated," Mercer acknowledged, "but not sophisticated enough. We recovered these from your central research facility on Draven Prime 2 months ago." "Impossible," whispered one of the Draven delegates. "Those servers are physically isolated from all networks." "Yes," agreed Reynolds, "which is why we sent in agents, not hackers." "Spies?" demanded Vextor. "You infiltrated a founding member's homeworld?" "We infiltrated all of them," Mercer replied matter-of-factly. "Every founding species, every major military installation, every research center developing weapons that violated Confederate law. We've had people in place for over a decade." Stunned silence fell over the chamber. "That's not possible," Counselor Eklara said finally, her feathered crest rising in agitation. "Humans have only been part of the Confederacy for 23 years. You couldn't have established that level of infiltration so quickly." "We didn't wait for an invitation," Reynolds explained. "Earth detected your observation posts in our solar system 60 years ago. We've known about the Confederacy much longer than you've known about us." The implications of this statement rippled through the assembly. The Confederacy prided itself on controlling first contact scenarios, carefully evaluating species before revealing the existence of interstellar civilization. The idea that humans had been watching them before formal contact challenged everything they believed about their technological superiority. "If what you claim is true," Vexator said slowly, "why expose yourselves now? Why not continue gathering intelligence?" "Because the bioweapon development reached a critical stage," Mercer answered. "The Draven were preparing for wide deployment. We couldn't wait any longer." She activated another recording showing a Draven military commander addressing his staff. "The human problem will be eliminated within 1 standard year. Their colonies will be cleansed first, creating the impression of a natural pandemic. Earth itself will be last after we've collected sufficient data from the colonial deployments. We intercepted this transmission 3 weeks ago," Reynolds explained. "The attack on our colonial station Athena wasn't an isolated incident. It was a field test for a larger campaign." If these accusations are true, said Counselor Mesdar carefully, her crystalline form refracting light as she shifted position, then the Draven have violated our most sacred laws. But this does not justify bringing military forces into the heart of Confederate space. We disagree, Reynolds replied. When we discovered multiple Council species were complicit in planning genocide, military response became our only option. Commander Ortiz spoke again from the view screen. Our ships are now transmitting evidence packages to every Confederate world simultaneously. The full scope of Project Purification is being revealed to all member species, not just the privileged few in this chamber. Panic spread through the Council representatives as they received confirmations from their homeworlds. The carefully maintained power structure of the Confederacy was crumbling in real time. You've doomed us all to chaos, Vextor said quietly. 12,000 years of peace destroyed in a day. Peace? Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Or control? The Confederacy has systematically suppressed technological development in newer member species, assassinated leaders who questioned Council decisions, and engineered economic dependencies to prevent autonomy. That's not peace, it's subjugation. Sometimes subjugation is necessary for stability, Calbrecht clicked, his mandibles moving rapidly. Lesser species lack the evolutionary wisdom to— And there it is, Mercer interrupted. The core belief that justified Project Purification. Some species simply matter less than others. A new alarm sounded and the chamber's AI announced, Alert, communication systems compromised. Unauthorized transmissions detected throughout Confederate space. What have you done now? Demanded Vextor. We're broadcasting the last 6 hours of this council session to every world in Confederate space, Reynolds explained, including Counselor Calbrecht's illuminating comment about lesser species. The insectoid counselor's exoskeleton rattled in distress. You should know, Reynolds continued, addressing the entire chamber, that human vessels aren't the only ones surrounding this station. 17 other species targeted by Project Purification have joined our coalition. Their ships decloaked 30 seconds ago. The view screens shifted to show hundreds of additional vessels, appearing near Confederate installations throughout the galaxy. Ships bearing the markings of species considered too minor to hold council seats. This isn't just humanity's retaliation, Mercer explained. It's the beginning of a reckoning for the entire Confederacy. You speak of reckoning, Vexitor said, his luminescence dimming further. Yet your ships have fired no weapons. What is your true purpose here? Reynolds smiled thinly. If we wanted destruction, Counselor, you would already be debris floating in space. Our retaliation isn't annihilation, it's transformation, he gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show documents bearing official council seals. These are the original founding documents of the Galactic Confederacy, Reynolds explained. Not the redacted versions taught to member species, but the actual agreements signed 12,000 years ago. They established a very different government than what exists today. Those archives are sealed, protested Counselor Tulvik. How did you— We had help, Mercer interrupted, nodding toward the back of the chamber. All eyes turned as a new figure entered, an elder Vextorian, his tentacles pale with age, moving slowly with the assistance of an anti-gravity harness. Patriarch Zilvan, gasped Vextor, recognizing the ancient leader of his own species. I provided the humans with access, the elder confirmed, his voice thin but clear, because our Confederacy has strayed too far from its founding principles. We created this union to prevent extinction during the Dark Time, not to establish permanent hierarchies. Treason, hissed the Draven ambassador. Correction, replied Zilvan. The true treason was transforming a confederation of equals into an empire of castes. Reynolds stepped forward again. Here are our terms. An emergency session of the full Confederate Assembly, not just the representatives in this chamber, but delegates from every member world. All evidence regarding Project Purification and related conspiracies will be presented. The Confederate Charter will be restored to its original form, with leadership rotating among all member species. A. The diplomatic wing of the Galactic Council Station hummed with urgent activity. Species that had barely acknowledged each other for centuries now huddled in corners, whispering frantically. Security personnel struggled to maintain order as accusations and threats flew between delegations. 12 hours had nearly passed since the council recess began, Admiral Reynolds and Dr. Mercer sat alone in a secure chamber, surrounded by a projected energy field that blocked both physical approach and electronic surveillance. Despite being technically prisoners, they displayed no concern. "Defensive fleets report all positions secure," Reynolds said, reviewing updates on his wrist device. "Coalition members are holding formation. No Confederate vessels have attempted to break containment. The information dissemination is proceeding faster than expected," Mercer added, studying her own display. 87% of Confederate worlds have received complete data packages. Public demonstrations have begun on 23 planets. The door slid open, and Patriarch Zilvan floated in on his anti-gravity harness. Despite being over 300 years old, ancient even for his long-lived species, his eyes remained sharp within his weathered face. "The council session resumes in 30 minutes, he informed them. "I bring news you should know before we reconvene." Reynolds gestured to an empty chair. "Please, Patriarch." The elderly Vextorian settled his harness into position. "The Grand Councilors are divided. 3 support accepting your terms immediately. They recognize the Confederacy cannot survive the revelations already spreading. 2 advocate for military response, believing your coalition can be defeated despite appearances. The remaining 2, including my descendant Vextor, seek a compromise." "There is no compromise position," Mercer said flatly. "The Confederate structure either changes completely or it collapses." "I have explained this," Zilvan agreed. His tentacles shifting in what humans had learned was a gesture of frustration. "But 12,000 years of privilege are not abandoned easily." "What do you expect them to propose?" Reynolds asked. "A limited reform. Expanded council membership, perhaps. Punishment of only the most directly implicated officials. Promises of investigation into the bioweapons program." The Patriarch's tentacles dimmed. Gestures designed to appear significant while preserving the fundamental power structure. Reynolds nodded. "As we anticipated. There is something else," Zilvan continued, his voice lower. "The Draven delegation has been in constant communication with their military command. I could not access the content, but the transmission patterns suggest." A chime from Reynolds' device interrupted. He checked the alert, his expression hardening. "The Draven have activated their contingency plan," he announced. 17 stealth vessels have just powered up engines near Earth. Mercer was immediately on her feet. "How did they get past our defensive grid?" "They didn't," Reynolds replied, reviewing the incoming data. "These ships have been in hibernation mode within the asteroid belt for at least 2 years. Minimal power signatures, specialized stealth shielding. Our deep space monitors only detected them when they began power-up sequences." "What are their capabilities?" Zilvan asked. "Unknown. But their configuration matches experimental weapon platforms we've been tracking in Draven shipyards." Reynolds's fingers moved rapidly over his device. "Commander Ortiz is redirecting assets to intercept, but the nearest vessels are 4 minutes out. The Draven will reach firing position in 3. We should return to the council chamber immediately," Mercer suggested. "Confront them directly." "Agreed," Reynolds said, already moving toward the door. "Patriarch, your presence would be valuable." "Of course," the elder Vextorian replied, his harness humming as it followed them into the corridor. They moved quickly through the station, security drones escorting them as both protection and surveillance. Representatives scurried out of their path, sensing the urgency in their movement. When they entered the council chamber, they found most delegates already in attendance. The Grand Councilors sat in tense discussion on their elevated platforms. The Draven ambassador was conspicuously absent. Without waiting for formal recognition, Reynolds strode to the center of the chamber. "The council session needs to resume immediately," he announced, his voice carrying through the vast space. "The Draven have launched an attack against Earth." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. "What evidence do you have of this claim?" demanded Vex's Tor, his luminescence flaring. Reynolds activated the main display screens showing tactical data from Earth's defense system. 17 red markers accelerated toward the blue sphere of humanity's homeworld. "These vessels have been hidden in our solar system for years," Reynolds explained. "They powered up 8 minutes ago and are on attack trajectory." "If this is true," Counselor Eklara said, her feathered crest rising in alarm, "it violates the recess agreement. More importantly," added Mercer, stepping forward, "it proves everything we've claimed about Draven intentions toward Earth." Vexator conferred briefly with the other Grand Councilors before responding. Where is the Draven ambassador? He should answer these allegations. He departed the station 20 minutes ago, reported a security officer. His diplomatic vessel engaged emergency protocols to bypass standard departure procedures. The implications spread through the chamber like a wave. The Draven knew what was coming. The attack vessels will reach firing position in 90 seconds, Reynolds updated, watching his display. Our interceptors are still 2 minutes out. Can your planetary defenses stop them? Asked Counselor Mesdar. Unknown, Reynolds admitted. These vessels use technology we haven't encountered before. The massive screens showed the Draven ships closing on Earth, their formation tightening as they prepared to attack. Billions of lives hung in the balance as the Council watched in stunned silence. 70 seconds to weapon range, Reynolds reported, his voice tight despite his military discipline. The Confederacy cannot permit this attack, declared Patriarch Zilvan suddenly, his aged voice carrying surprising strength. If Earth falls while we debate, the Confederacy falls with it. Every species targeted by Project Purification will believe they are next. We have no vessels in position to intervene, Vex's Tor responded, gesturing helplessly at the tactical display. 60 seconds, Reynolds updated. Mercer stepped forward, her eyes hard. This was their plan all along. The Draven knew we'd discovered Project Purification. They prepared this attack as a contingency, waiting for the perfect moment when our fleet was deployed to the Council station. 50 seconds. Can you recall your vessels from our space? Asked Counselor Tulvek desperately. Not in time, Reynolds answered. Even at maximum FTL, they'd need hours to reach Earth. 40 seconds. The chamber had fallen completely silent, representatives from 5,000 worlds watching as history unfolded before them. The destruction of Earth would trigger an interstellar war unlike anything the Confederacy had seen in millennia. 30 seconds. Reynolds stood perfectly still, his face impassive despite watching his homeworld's impending attack. Beside him, Mercer's expression showed only cold calculation. 20 seconds. Draven vessels are powering weapon systems. This cannot stand, Patriarch Zilvan declared. The Council must— 10 seconds, Reynolds interrupted. Draven vessels have locked targeting systems on major population centers. The tactical display showed the alien ships in perfect attack formation, their weapon signatures reaching maximum power. Earth seemed defenseless before them. 5 seconds. The chamber collectively held its breath. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Nothing happened. The Draven ships maintained position, weapons hot but unfired. What's happening? Demanded Vex Tor. A slow smile spread across Reynolds' face. Phase 3, he said simply. The tactical display shifted, zooming in on the Draven vessels. Small objects suddenly appeared alongside each ship, objects that hadn't registered on any sensors until they activated. 17 minutes ago, Mercer explained to the stunned Council, human operatives activated dormant systems attached to every Draven attack vessel. Those are neural disruptors, keyed specifically to Draven neurology. Every crew member aboard those ships is currently unconscious. Impossible, whispered Counselor Kalbrek. How could you have known about these ships if they were undetectable? We didn't need to detect them, Reynolds replied. We put the disruptors on every Draven military vessel 3 years ago during routine maintenance cycles. The fact that these particular ships were sent to Earth was irrelevant. They were compromised before they ever left Draven space. The Council chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. Control. Signals are being transmitted from our defense platforms, Reynolds continued. The Draven vessels are now being guided into stable orbit for boarding and seizure. You allowed this attack to proceed, Vex's Tor said slowly, his luminescence pulsing with realization. You could have neutralized these vessels at any time. Yes, admitted Reynolds without apology. We needed to demonstrate 3 things to this Council. First, that the Draven were indeed planning genocide against Earth. Second, that the Confederate leadership was either complicit or powerless to prevent it. And third, asked Counselor Mesdar, 3 days after humanity's revelations shook the Galactic Confederacy to its core, the Council station buzzed with unprecedented activity. Security protocols had been modified, allowing representatives from all member worlds, not just the privileged few normally permitted in the chamber, to attend emergency sessions. Species that had never set foot in the hallowed halls now crowded the corridors, their diverse biologies requiring hasty environmental accommodations. Admiral Reynolds stood at a viewport in a private meeting room, watching as more diplomatic vessels arrived. The Confederacy had over 8,000 member worlds, and delegations were still pouring in from across the galaxy. "They're calling it the Great Assembly," said Dr. Mercer as she entered, carrying data tablets. "The first time in Confederate history that all member species have been invited to participate in governance." "The founding species are still resisting," Reynolds noted, turning from the viewport. "Their delegates are demanding special consideration during the restructuring process." "Of course they are," Mercer replied, setting down her tablets. 12,000 years of privilege doesn't disappear overnight. She activated a holographic display showing real-time data from across Confederate space. But public opinion has turned decisively against them. The evidence of Project Purification was too damning to ignore. Reynolds nodded. "What's the status of the Coalition fleet?" "Maintaining position. The 17 species targeted in Project Purification have formally announced military alliance with Earth. Together, we now control strategic points throughout Confederate space." Mercer brought up a tactical display showing the positions of Coalition vessels. Confederate military forces remain in disarray. Most ship captains are refusing orders from Central Command until the political situation stabilizes. And the Draven? In chaos. After we revealed their leadership's complicity in the bioweapons program, 3 major Draven colony worlds declared independence from their homeworld government. Civil unrest has erupted in major cities across Draven Prime. Mercer's expression remained clinical despite the gravity of the situation. Their ambassador has formally requested asylum with the Vexatorian delegation. He claims he was unaware of the full scope of Project Purification. "Convenient," Reynolds remarked dryly. A chime announced another visitor. The door slid open to reveal Patriarch Zilvan, accompanied by a younger Vexatorian female. Reynolds recognized as Professor Telnar, a historian from one of their colony universities. "Admiral, Doctor," the Patriarch greeted them, his tentacles pulsing with subdued colors that indicated cautious optimism in his species. "May we join you?" "Of course," Reynolds gestured to the meeting table. "We were just reviewing the latest developments." When all 4 were seated, Zilvan introduced his companion formally. "Professor Telnar has been researching the early history of the Confederacy for many cycles. Her work has been discouraged by the Council, but in light of recent events, her perspective has become valuable." The young professor's tentacles shifted in patterns suggesting nervousness. "I have spent my career studying the founding documents you revealed to the Council, Admiral. The original Confederate Charter established a very different system than what evolved over millennia." "We noticed that," Mercer said. "The original charter called for rotating leadership and equal representation, principles that disappeared within the first 1,000 years. "Yes," agreed Telnar, her color patterns brightening with scholarly enthusiasm. "The concentration of power among the founding species was gradual but deliberate. Emergency provisions enacted during the Third Expansion Crisis were never rescinded. Temporary security protocols became permanent. Special authorities justified by external threats became institutional privileges. The classic pattern of all empires," Reynolds observed. "Security and stability used to justify increasingly centralized control." "What interests me," Mercer interjected, "is why the founding species felt threatened enough by humanity to consider genocide. We've been Confederate members for barely 2 decades, hardly enough time to pose a significant threat." Telnar's tentacles flickered with an expression Reynolds couldn't quite interpret. "Tell them." Zilvan encouraged her. "The Council commissioned a classified study 5 standard years ago," Telnar explained. "A comparative analysis of technological advancement rates among all Confederate species. Humanity's development trajectory was unprecedented." "In what way?" Reynolds asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Most species follow predictable patterns of technological advancement," the professor elaborated. "The time from discovering atomic energy to achieving interstellar travel typically spans 15 to 20 generations. For humans, it was less than 4 generations. We're adaptable," Mercer said simply. "More than adaptable," Telnar corrected. "The study projected that at current advancement rates, Human technology would surpass that of the founding species within 100 years. Your cultural assimilation capabilities were equally concerning. Humans have integrated alien concepts and methodologies faster than any species in Confederate record. Reynolds and Mercer exchanged glances. So, Project Purification was motivated by fear, Reynolds concluded. Fear disguised as prudence, Zilvan added. The Council convinced itself that humanity represented an existential threat to Confederate stability. The same justification was applied to the other 16 species targeted for elimination, all relatively new members, demonstrating rapid advancement or cultural influence. New alert chimed on Reynolds' device. He checked it quickly. The emergency session is being called to order, he announced. It seems the Grand Councilors have finished their private deliberations and reached a decision, asked Mercer. We're about to find out. The Great Assembly was unlike anything in Confederate history. The main council chamber had been reconfigured, its tiered seating extended and modified to accommodate thousands of additional delegates. The 7 elevated platforms of the Grand Councilors remained, but now seemed dwarfed by the sea of representatives surrounding them. Reynolds, Mercer, and their Vexatorian companions entered through a side entrance, drawing immediate attention. Whispers spread through the assembly as species from across the galaxy recognized the humans who had shattered 12,000 years of political certainty. The emergency session of the Confederate Assembly will come to order, announced Grand Councilor Vextor, his voice subdued compared to his earlier appearances. His luminescent patterns were muted, reflecting the diminished authority of his position. When the chamber quieted, Vexator continued. For 3 days the Council has deliberated on the evidence presented by the Earth delegation and the demands of the coalition they represent. We have also consulted with legal and historical experts regarding the original Confederate Charter and its subsequent modifications. Reynolds noted the careful wording, not the human delegation, but the Earth delegation, a subtle acknowledgement of humanity's status as equals rather than subordinates. The revelations regarding Project Purification have caused understandable distress throughout Confederate space, Vextor acknowledged. The unauthorized development of species-specific bioweapons violates our most fundamental laws. Those directly responsible will face justice according to Confederate legal protocols. Murmurs spread through the assembly, many delegates clearly unsatisfied with this limited admission of culpability. However, Vextor continued, raising his appendages for silence, the broader questions raised regarding Confederate governance structure require more extensive consideration. The Council proposes forming a constitutional convention with representatives from all member worlds to evaluate potential reforms over the next standard year. The chamber erupted in objections. Reynolds remained silent, watching the reaction spread through the assembly. After several minutes of growing disorder, Vextor's amplified voice cut through the noise. The Council has not finished its statement. When order was partially restored, Councilor Eklara rose to speak, her feathered crest fully extended in a formal posture. While the Constitutional Convention proceeds with its work, she announced, the Council proposes immediate implementation of Interim Governance Protocol 7, which would expand Council membership to include representatives from all regional sectors, with rotating leadership positions. More objections rose, particularly from the coalition species aligned with Earth. Reynolds finally stood, the chamber gradually quieting as he moved to the central speaking position. The Council's proposal is insufficient, he stated simply. A year of deliberation while maintaining the fundamental power structure is not acceptable to Earth or our coalition partners. What alternative do you propose, Admiral? Asked Vextor, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Immediate implementation of the original charter, Reynolds replied. Not a modified version, not a committee to study potential reforms, the actual governance structure established when the Confederacy was founded. That document is 12,000 years old, protested Councilor Tulvek. The Confederacy has expanded from 50 worlds to over 8,000. The original systems would be completely impractical now. One standard month after the Great Assembly, the Galactic Confederacy was unrecognizable. The Council Station itself symbolized the transformation. Its grand architecture remained, but the layout had been completely reconfigured. The elevated platforms that once held the Grand Counselors had been dismantled. In their place stood a circular arrangement of identical podiums, each representing one of the 27 newly established regional sectors of Confederate space. Admiral Reynolds stood in the observation gallery, watching representatives from hundreds of worlds mingle in the chamber below. Species that had once been relegated to the periphery now moved freely through the central floor, their voices carrying equal weight in discussions. "Quite a change from your first appearance here," observed a familiar voice. Reynolds turned to find Patriarch Zilvan approaching, his anti-gravity harness humming softly. The elder Vexatorian looked tired but satisfied, his tentacles pulsing with colors that indicated contentment in his species. "The transition has been smoother than expected," Reynolds acknowledged. "On the surface, perhaps," Zilvan replied. "Beneath, there are currents of resistance. 3 founding species delegations have reduced their participation to observer status. The Draven civil conflict continues on 2 colony worlds. Some administrative systems are experiencing unexplained technical difficulties that delay implementation of the new protocols." "All anticipated," said Reynolds. 12,000 years of entrenched power doesn't disappear in a month." They watched as the session below organized itself, representatives taking positions around the chamber. The meeting would be the first formal session of the Provisional Confederate Assembly, the governing body established to oversee the transition to full charter implementation. "There, you are?" called Dr. Mercer as she joined them, accompanied by Professor Telnar. Both carried data tablets filled with complex diagrams and text. "We've been finalizing the technology sharing protocols. Any progress?" Reynolds asked. "Significant," Telnar answered, her tentacles shifting in patterns that suggested excitement. 17 member worlds have already committed to the open exchange program. Even 2 founding species colonies have joined against the recommendations of their homeworlds. "The momentum is building," Mercer added. "Once the economic benefits become clear, others will follow." The restricted technology policies were always counterproductive. They limited growth across the entire Confederacy to maintain artificial advantages. Reynolds nodded. "And the bioweapons investigation?" Mercer's expression darkened. 342 individuals have been identified as directly involved in Project Purification. 78 have been arrested. The others have either fled Confederate space or gone into hiding on their homeworlds where local authorities are reluctant to pursue them. "That will change," Zilvan assured them. "As the new power structures solidify, homeworld governments will find it increasingly difficult to shield the guilty." A chime announced the beginning of the session below. The 4 observers fell silent as Delegate Moroval took the central position. The elderly representative from one of the Confederacy's smallest member species, a world that had never held significant influence under the old system, had been elected to chair the Provisional Assembly. "Representatives of the Confederacy," Moroval began, his translated voice carrying through the chamber. "We convene today to continue implementing the original charter, as ratified by the Great Assembly. Our agenda includes finalizing the sector representation formulas, establishing the rotation schedule for leadership positions, and reviewing the proposed security protocols." Reynolds watched the proceedings with careful attention. The debate was spirited but constructive, with voices from previously marginalized worlds contributing perspectives that would have been ignored under the old council. "You seem satisfied, Admiral," observed Telnar. "Cautiously optimistic," Reynolds corrected. "This is just the beginning. The real test will come when difficult decisions must be made. Resource allocations, military deployments, treaty negotiations with non-Confederate powers." "Speaking of military matters," Mercer interjected, checking a notification on her device. "Commander Ortiz reports that coalition forces have begun the planned drawdown. 5% of our vessels have returned to their home systems, with another 10% scheduled to depart next week." "Good," Reynolds nodded. "We need to demonstrate that our intervention was temporary. The coalition was formed to create change, not to establish a new power block. Some would argue that a continued military presence would ensure the reforms remain in place," suggested Telnar. "And they'd be correct in the short term," Reynolds acknowledged. "But long-term stability can't depend on force. The new Confederacy must stand on its own principles, not human oversight." Their conversation paused as a commotion erupted in the chamber below. The former Grand Counselor Vexator had taken the speaking position, his luminescence pulsing with intensity. The proposed technology-sharing protocols go too far, he was arguing. Unrestricted exchange of advanced systems threaten security across Confederate space. Some technologies require careful oversight to prevent misuse. The same argument that was used to justify keeping newer member worlds technologically dependent on founding species, countered a delegate from one of Earth's coalition partners. The original charter is clear. All members have equal access to scientific advancement. The original charter was written when the Confederacy comprised 50 worlds of comparable development. Vexator replied. The modern reality is far more complex. The debate intensified. Representatives from various factions presenting competing perspectives. Reynolds watched with interest as the discussion unfolded without the predetermined outcomes that had characterized the old council. This is how it should be, Sylvan commented. Genuine debate without predetermined conclusions. Will they reach consensus? Telnar wondered. Eventually, Mercer predicted. The economic benefits of open technology exchange are too significant to ignore. Even the founding species will ultimately gain more from collaboration than restriction. As the debate continued below, a station attendant approached their observation gallery. Admiral Reynolds. Dr. Mercer, the attendant said formally, your presence is requested in conference chamber. 7. The Earth delegation has received an important communication from your homeworld. Reynolds and Mercer exchanged glances before excusing themselves from their Vextorian companions. Did Commander Ortiz forward any details? Reynolds asked as they followed the attendant through the station corridors. No, Mercer replied, checking her device. But the priority marker is diplomatic, not military. Likely something from the Earth Council regarding the new trade proposals. When they reached Conference Chamber 7, they found it occupied by Lieutenant Marcus Wright, their communications specialist. His expression was uncharacteristically tense. What is it, Lieutenant? Reynolds asked as the door sealed behind them. Message from Earth, sir, Wright replied, activating the secure display. Director Alvarez needs to speak with you immediately. The screen illuminated, showing the stern face of Elena Alvarez, director of the Earth Intelligence Directorate, and the architect of much of humanity's infiltration of Confederate systems. Admiral. Doctor, she greeted them without preamble. We've detected anomalous activity in deep space monitoring stations. Unknown vessels have been observed at the edges of 17 systems, including Sol. Reynolds' expression remained calm, but his posture straightened. Confederate vessels? Negative, Alvarez replied. The configurations don't match any known Confederate design. They appear to be using some form of partial phase technology. Our sensors can only detect them when they transition between states. First contact scenario? Mercer suggested. Possibly, Alvarez conceded, but their behavior suggests reconnaissance rather than exploration. These vessels are systematically mapping our defense capabilities. They're particularly focused on systems belonging to the coalition species. Have they responded to communication attempts? Reynolds asked. They haven't maintained solid phase long enough for signal transmission, Alvarez explained. Whether that's deliberate or a limitation of their technology is unclear. Reynolds considered the implications. The timing is interesting, appearing just as the Confederacy undergoes its most significant political restructuring in millennia. My assessment exactly, Alvarez agreed. This may be opportunistic, a potential adversary testing our capabilities during a period of transition. Or, Mercer suggested, they've been observing for some time and only now became detectable due to changes in our scanning protocols under the new charter. Reynolds nodded. Have you shared this information with Confederate security? Not yet, Alvarez replied. I wanted your assessment first. The political situation remains delicate. Inform them immediately, Reynolds decided. This is exactly the sort of external challenge the new Confederate structure needs to prove itself against. If these are indeed unknown vessels, all member worlds should be alerted. Agreed, Mercer added. The original charter was created during a period of external threat, the so-called dark time. This situation could reinforce the value of genuine cooperation rather than hierarchical control.